Hi, I'm Katie, and this is the Free Art and Design School podcast web series, Whatever. I have one of my favorite artists here today, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Maggie. Hi.
Do you want to talk about the different kinds of art making you do?
Absolutely. So basically, right now, I work at a small independent art supply store and I do art on the side. So I do, oh my gosh, I've gotten into various types of art making. I used to do lots of freelance illustration, and now it's more like figuring out airbrush and silver point and doing block prints and making shirts and making sculptures and just doing stuff for fun. Every once in a while, I'm in a gallery show, but that's infrequent.
And you've also done murals, and you
Oh,
do like,
yes.
every physical medium known to man. It's crazy.
Oh, yeah. At this point, a lot of
Were
media.
you classically trained in a particular artistic medium? Because I feel like we've talked a little bit about that in the past, but maybe not.
That's a really good question. I've spent most of my time doing artwork with watercolor. That's for sure, like where I started, where I spent most of my time was with watercolor. But I wasn't, it was more like my mom did watercolor, so I was introduced to it early on and I just stuck with it. But I for sure had no one teach me how to do watercolor. Just got tips along the way.
Got it.
That's
So
how it
you
started.
started with the most difficult medium possible to
Yeah.
master.
Yes. Yes. Highly advise that for everybody.
And were you doing like landscapes, portraits? Like what, when you were younger, like what got you interested in making art?
Oh, 100% portraits always. Yes.
Really?
Always faces, people, animals, plants. Yes, definitely that. For sure, I'm not as into like houses, cars, electronics. Like I'm mostly stuck with people, faces.
Interesting. I guess that explains a lot of your not character design, but like the stuff that you do a lot of are these like beautiful like the mural that you did is like this like woman creature thing with rainbows, which is like
Yes.
amazing. Like do you feel yourself drawn, well, I mean, you're doing so many different things at once. Like is there like a particular challenge that you like about different media? Or like what's drawing you in these different directions?
You've nailed it. Oh my gosh. Yes. It's 100% the challenge. I love the challenge of a new medium. And for sure, like working at the art store has facilitated that process a little bit just because I'm introduced to new things. I'm just around more, like, I guess, more obscure mediums than I used to be around. So that's when I started using, just recently, I started doing silver point, super crazy, really hard, but I love that it's really challenging. I love that it's complicated to do. And that's definitely a draw for me. I like that. I like that challenge.
Do you guys sell metal stuff, like silver point stuff at the shop?
Kind of. We have some tools, but for sure you can always special order like silver point drawing ground from our warehouses. We don't
Got
always
it.
have it on the shelf, but we can always get it for you. I don't mean to be art salesman.
No, it's fine.
Try.
But that's super interesting. And I met you at the shop during COVID when I had started going to art school, and it's like a whole crazy time in everyone's life. But I definitely feel like having access to different materials is so useful. Like watercolor always scared me before,
Yes.
before art school, and now it's like my
With watercolor now. Oh my
yeah.
gosh. Yeah.
But it took years to build up the confidence to be able to approach something like that. So, like, sort of what makes you comfortable being flexible? Because obviously, trying a new
Mm,
medium implies some amount of possibility of error or failure. And I think that's really scary to a lot of people.
I guess that I oh excellent question. But I feel like I almost get more scared to be stuck doing the same thing. I get really gosh, I get antsy for the next project. As soon
Yeah.
as I've started working on one thing, I pretty much, well, essentially, I've got a bunch of half starts all over. I rarely finish anything, mostly because I get excited to do the next thing. I can already envision how it's going to end. So I want to just move on to the next and explore something totally new because this is already boring. Um, I guess that's my issue.
It's golden retriever brain.
Yeah,
Too many
yeah,
exciting things going on.
exactly. So I have yet to like nail down a specific look or a medium I always work with or a specific style. Like I have yet to land on that. I don't know if that's necessary, but it's for sure something that feels like would be acceptable in the art world as having a signature look.
Yeah.
I don't.
But I think that's like a social pressure more than anything. I think there's hopefully a contemporary drive towards being, you know, a jack of all trades, master of none. But you definitely like the social media like algorithm forces people to be really similar to their old styles, which is not always a good thing.
I think it's really, well, personally, I think that's a really detrimental thing to an artist, to make you stick with a specific look. Like that's not how we change and develop and grow. Like, for sure you have to try new things and fail before you're able to, oh my gosh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Come on. What is that?
Also, am I right that you used to do tattoos? That was also something that you did for a little while?
Yeah, that is right. Oh my gosh. Yes. So I was a tattoo apprentice for a couple of years, and I did a number of tattoos, probably about 20 or so.
Oh wow.
Before realizing that that was not for me, I moved onto whatever it is I do now. But I still love like the art of tattoos. I love how it looks. I love the process. I just learned that I didn't love hurting people, even though I like tattoos. I have tattoos, but I still just couldn't. It was really tough for me to like continually hurt someone just to get good shading. I had real problems doing that. It made me very anxious. I almost threw up on a customer once. Oh my
No.
God. It was so nauseous from the anxiety. Oh God.
Oh my God. So that's a little funny. But
Yes.
did creating these permanent pieces of art give you kind of a perspective on art making? Like, do you think it shaped any of your art practice at all? Because that's a pretty different process from like painting a canvas or making a print.
It definitely.
Oh no. Oh, sorry. It just cut out for a second. Keep talking. That's my bad.
You're fine. Well, basically, is it again, good question. You're full of them. But so in the apprenticeship, I learned how like tattoo flash is made, or how essentially how the artwork is made to do the tattoo. And I think that in doing artwork that way, like forced in the shop, like for a couple of years, it kind of, for sure, it did change how I work on things, or how I can it made me be able to simplify images a little easier. And
Mm,
I've taken some of the realism that I used to focus on in my art, and now I've been able to simplify a little bit and do like big gestures more easily than I used to be able to do. So I think for sure that it's helped me in that way. But I haven't even thought about that until you asked me. So that's, yes, well done.
my favorite interviews are the ones where people afterwards are like, "Wow, I'm thinking about my art in a new way," and I'm like, "Good." I'm like the opposite of a therapist. I'm like,
Yeah. Ooh,
uh,
ooh. We all
but
need
not
that.
in a bad way.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's super interesting. And I was also going to ask you, like, I've had a number of people on here who are both like art, like drawing illustrative artists, and then also work in 3D. And I'm sort of interested in like how, like I personally don't really work in three-dimensional stuff too much because it feels like such a foreign thing to me. But that's like a lot of what you've been doing is exploring these more like dimensional forms of artwork. And has that like, is that like a total, not, I was going to swear, but I shouldn't do that in case my grandma watches these. But I was going to say, is that like kind of like a mind warping process to like step into this other dimension and have to work in a different way sculpturally?
Mm. Ooh, okay. So I wouldn't say so much like mind warping as in, I think that even though I have done mostly like watercolor in general, for sure growing up I did many things. I made little like sculpty animals and whatnot. Like for sure I have made little sculptures and like three-dimensional stuff. Like I used to sew clothing, things like
Oh
that.
wow.
So it wasn't it's not so much like opening my mind in a different way. It's almost like, okay, now that I'm working on this 3D thing, this whole other avenue of things opens up as well. So I too many possibilities is sometimes an issue that I come up against. And if anything, once I go into the three-dimensional realm, it's almost like it's hard to stop myself from just going all in.
Yeah.
Even though I feel like more practiced in doing two-dimensional stuff, I feel like a little bit more confident doing that, but I get excited about the 3D stuff for sure. Oh gosh. And I feel like if I was going to really pursue that, I should get some sort of formal training
Yeah.
in that regard, or I would like to have that.
Yeah. Although, I mean, I'd personally argue that like not having training makes you make more interesting stuff than being trained. Like
Totally.
you're making
Yeah.
stuff that arguably no one's made before, and because you don't know the right or wrong way to do things, it kind of opens up different avenues, like you were saying, to make kind of whatever you want and put your own stamp on it.
Oh, for sure. I completely agree with that. Yeah, that's very true. And I mean, I did go to, it's funny, you said you went to something in San Francisco. You did something in San Francisco.
I worked at a letterpress shop in San Francisco,
Letterpress.
and I did
Fun.
Rizzo printing in Berkeley for fun.
Very cool. I used to go to school up there and I lived there for 4 years. I
Wow. Oh
was
my God.
in the College of the Arts and I was very grateful to have the illustration like education that I got there, but I was always into all the other classes that they offered. And I wish I took all the other classes that were there. So I still want to like go back and do some schooling of some sort.
You should. Although you clearly don't need it, but if you're drawn to it. I mean, that's kind of the point of this online project that I'm doing where I'm interviewing people, is to have online access for people to learn how to do different things and hear different perspectives. But I'm always I would never tell someone to get an MFA, but I'm always of the perspective that like if you're really interested in being in an academic setting, like
Yeah.
what works for you, basically.
Yes, especially yeah, especially if you want an MFA, like there's no other way to do it. But I for sure like if someone asked me like, oh, do I think someone should go to art school to like get an illustration degree? I would have like, well, I don't know if that's necessary. In fact, it's probably not necessary at all.
Yeah. It's
Even
kind of
though
crazy, honestly. But that's also kind of the product of like the contemporary landscape of education that we live in. It's more expensive now than ever. There's more online access more now than ever. And like 50 years ago, you could go to school for nothing and they teach you everything and it was fine. And now it's, you know how it is. It's very competitive to get into art school. It's very expensive.
extremely expensive, and you don't even know if some like professor wise, you don't really know who you're going to get depending on the school you go to. Like you could end up with someone who's fantastic and wonderful or someone who makes totally different work that you're interested in. Like it's all up in the air as far as that goes.
Yeah. So you went to CCA. Did you
Yes.
CCA has like sort of one of the broadest programs in terms of, they well, I guess the Oakland campus is now closed or like mostly closed.
Yeah, yeah,
But
it is.
they
Yes.
had all this like metalworking and woodworking and all these cool things. Do you think exposure to those things, because you said you were interested in all of those classes, like do you think in the back of your mind you knew that you wanted to be more of a generalist than an illustrator at the time, or is that kind of a more recent reckoning that you've come to about yourself?
Definitely more of a recent reckoning. I think that I was always drawn to all those other mediums that were available then in school, but I always felt like a hard, like, oh, but you need to be able to make money after you graduate, and those things can't necessarily make you money. Whereas if you have an illustration degree, like illustrations are like paid for essentially, like it's like art that is paid for before you even make it. So it's like, fine, that seems like a way to possibly make money in the art world. I'll do that. And it's only been recently over the past, number of years where I had done illustration and some graphic design, freelance and whatnot. And I wanted a steady paycheck and I was, really hating freelance work, man. Like I would like dread when I didn't have a project. And as soon as one came in, I would begin the dreading process all over again. Like, oh, now I have to do this work. And so anyways, I find that now that I finally have like the steady paycheck with something kind of art related, I can finally explore what it is that got me excited to do art in the first place, which is just kind of messing around and creating whatever I want without having the pressures of having to make money from it, which
That's
is
amazing.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
like really cool to be in that place and be able to kind of like explore that. Yeah, that's kind of interesting because I've also like interviewed a mixture of people who like have full-time jobs that aren't art related or art adjacent, but then like do their art on the side versus people who are like full-time artists who have like made that jump.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting hearing the different perspectives because there's no right or wrong way to be an artist. Like there's a million different paths to being able to make your own artwork and feel fulfilled in it. But you're right that there's a lot of anxiety in a lot of those paths.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I find I could be anxious in any one of those things, but for sure, like doing freelance work, it made me very anxious. I was just worried about like, when am I going to get that paycheck? When am I going to be able to make rent? That was
Yeah.
always so stressful. So I'm happy to not have that specific stress. And now I just have the stress of like, oh, well, do I really want to pursue this art thing and like take it somewhere? Where is that somewhere? Where do I go from here?
Yeah.
I
The who am I as a person art stress.
yeah. Oh my
Have
God.
you for I was going to say, how have you made peace having all these different interests, or perhaps have you even made peace with the fact
Oh,
that you have all of these different interests? Because you don't get to define yourself as like, I'm a photographer, I'm a sculptor.
yeah,
You have all these interests.
for sure. I have all these interests, and I have not made peace with myself at all in that. I struggle, I would say almost daily, like, oh, is this the thing or is that the thing? Because I also, besides like drawing, painting, some sculpture, some like block printing and whatnot, I also love to bake so much. I've considered going to culinary school. There's a great program over here at LACC that anyways, I've also looked into that. Like, do I go to pastries, become a pastry chef? Who knows? I've also gotten into making perfume recently. Super new, super different, feels
Oh my
very like
God.
reset. But so yeah, I'm still struggling with that, have not made peace in any way.
Oh
But
my
if you
God.
have any advice for that, I'll take it for
Well,
sure.
I think it comes back again to kind of the contemporary pressure to specialize. I mean, you've always had people who've specialized in certain things. On one of these other interviews I talked about, I read this book and there was a poet, and the poet was described as a poet gardener. Like that was like his hundreds of years ago, that was like his thing, is that's how he was known, and how you would never really be able to find that as a job listing on not Zillow, on LinkedIn.
Yeah,
um,
yeah, yeah, for sure.
but it's like, life is this weird thing, in whatever era you live in, you're sort of defined by the customs and standards of that era. And it's a shame that people, not that they're looked down upon if they don't pick a particular thing, but they aren't celebrated necessarily. And I think that's a shame.
Yes, I think they're not celebrated and they're not like marketable, and I
Right.
think that right now it's whatever, as long as you're marketable, then it's successful. So I don't with, but that's not, that doesn't mean you're actually successful or not, at least in my opinion.
Yeah. And
I mean,
I think that's also the divide historically between what it meant to be like a commercial artist versus a fine artist. Like obviously fine artists have also been kind of put in boxes, but like Andy Warhol could make a sculpture or a painting or a print or whatever, and that was fine, versus like someone who works in a commercial area is sort of limited by, like you said, what's marketable or what's desired by a client.
mhm.
So
100, yeah.
I don't know. Sad times we live in.
Yeah, yes, or at least said creatively. It feels like there's like a damper on that side. But on the flip side though, I do have to say, just being around so many different artists, different types of people at the job that I've got, it is encouraging because pretty much daily I get someone, needing help starting a new art endeavor, and they're just excited to get going and get some art supplies. And it makes me like, okay, there's some little speck of light out there. There's some like little ray of sunshine. People still make stuff and they're excited to make things. And that makes me a little happy.
Yeah.
A little bit. Yeah.
And that's sort of our job as artists, is to help other artists along the way and to be more encouraging than discouraging, because the world is discouraging enough as it is. I'm sort of wondering, like, what is that kind of spark for you when you're starting a project, whether it be perfume or sculpture, making a fake pastry or a real pastry? Like what and for context, you do these sculptures that look like pastries, so for people
Yes.
wondering.
Yeah.
But like what gets you excited to do something, and how do you
Mm.
just wake up and you're like, I want to do a watercolor painting today versus a sculpture? Or like what's kind of the decisive process
Mm.
for you?
Gosh, this is the process. So there's usually many things I'm excited to do. It's really just like, what is the thing in that moment that I'd like to focus on? And for sure, I have no like discerning process that helps pick the thing. It's more about like, oh yeah, I'll be, taking a walk and like suddenly, you get the thing that falls into place. Like, oh yeah, that's how I can solve that issue with the shirt. Great. So I'll just go home and I'll work on that thing.
Mm.
It's more about just, oh gosh, that's a good question. I do try to like continually like sketch and draw and go on walks and go to the library, boring things like that, that to me at least help me come up with ideas or find, so I find I get solutions for ideas I have when I go on walks. Like if I'm just like out in nature or on a hike or something, that's when I find the solution to something, but I have to like not be trying to think of it, which is
Yeah.
counterintuitive, but yeah, you probably get that totally as a fellow art person. Yeah, if
Yeah.
I'm trying to find the solution, if I'm trying to just only laser focus on like, oh my gosh, how do I do the composition on this? How can I get the shading right? Like I'm never going to think of it. But if I totally stop thinking about it at all, then all those solutions come.
Yeah. For me, it's driving. Weirdly enough, like when I was in college and I had to write an essay, I'd go for a half-hour drive. And in that, I think what it is, it's like part of your brain that's required to do the walking or the driving is also the spinny thing. And so while
Yeah.
that's tied up doing another task, your creative brain has kind of space to run in the background. That's how my brain works, I think. I'm not really sure.
That makes so much sense. And I've heard that before. You've said it more clearly than I've heard it in the past. But really, I've for sure heard it. That's why people can think of things in the shower, because you're busy, like you're on autopilot. And if you're just like,
Yeah.
if your body is just like busy doing this thing, like you have the brain space to be able to think of that other thing. So smart,
Very
lady.
cool. We need a neuroscientist in to do some studies. I wanted to ask you, I know you have a million different media, so this is kind of not a direct question, but I was going to ask, like, who are some of your inspirations for some of the work it may be more for your drawing and painting than for the sculpture, but like in general, who inspires you?
Yeah, absolutely. So for sure, growing up, I had like kids books, as most folks do. But I had kids books with the illustrator. They were all done by Chris Van Allsburg, I believe is his name. He did like the illustrations for Jumanji and Polar Express,
Wow.
things like that. So very like highly rendered, black and white, beautiful, super surreal images. So for sure, like that was an illustrator I always loved. I didn't know that I loved him really until later on, but I was like, oh yeah, I've always kind of gone back to that sort of like look and style and feel. Currently though, oh my gosh, I got introduced to her work after working at the art store, but and again, probably butchering her name, but I believe it's Louise Bonnet. It
Okay.
ends with T, so I think it's Bonnet. I don't think it's Bonnet. Yeah. Anyways, she's a lovely person, but the most skilled oil painter. She does these lovely, it's mostly bodies of women. You can't really see their face, or it's hidden or disfigured, and they're always really heavy and weighty, and they have this huge presence. And that always I find very inspiring and gorgeous to look at. She's just really good at what she does. So I for sure, in like the mural that you've seen,
Yeah.
sadly it's true. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm thinking about her, like big heavy women, and trying to incorporate that kind of feel into my stuff when I work big or try to do things like that. So for sure those are two people I find wonderful.
That's really awesome. And that's really cool that you pull from these different illustrative and painting styles to influence your work. And that totally makes sense, because those two descriptions really, like, in my mind, can explain kind of like how you have this like very drawing illustrative style, but also like has a kind of like more physical weight or presence. Do you find yourself like, I don't know, often when I'm asking one of these questions, it's because I struggle with the same thing. It's not because it's a great question I have for a particular person. It's that like these are universal questions that I'm trying to like understand about the world and about your personal work. But like, do you think that like having so many different projects going all at the same time can like help you solve problems in other fields? Like if that do you ever have cross contamination between your projects, or do you sort of view them as separate things that you can go to when you're feeling stuck in one of the other fields?
Oh God. Oh man. Okay. Well,
This is the psychoanalysis episode of the podcast.
I'm into it. I'm here for it. Oh my gosh. I mean, mostly it feels like, oh man, it's yes. When I'm currently working on a project, say like, okay, so I'm for this like, oh my gosh, my little fake frosting pastry thing. I'm teaching a class soon,
Oh my
and
God.
tiny little, I happen to have them with me, but essentially I'm making like tiny little sculpey like bones and pumpkins and little like for it. It's all Halloween themed. It's gonna be very fun.
Oh my
But
God.
in doing that, it's very I like to have side projects like that where basically I can do them mindlessly.
Mhm.
So while I'm working on them, I'm doing like my little Sculpey bone and I have like 40 more to go and I've already done 20 or whatever it is. It's like that's when I'm like, oh yeah, so for that t-shirt I want to make, yeah, how about oh yeah. And so then I'll like set that down, go to the next thing. But it's hard for me to get to that. Yeah, it's that same thing with the driving, with the taking the walk. It's almost like I can autopilot one art project, and while that's happening, my brain's already working on the next one.
Mhm.
Or this trying to solve the next idea. I for sure I don't have a great process. I definitely hop around to everything, and it's hard for me to finish things. And I always feel the pressure to like maybe change that and somehow do focus and finish the projects. Uh, but it's also, I have more fun hopping around and hopefully it'll be okay to keep doing that.
Well, being an artist, you don't want your art to be the thing that you dread, where it's all scheduled in the spreadsheet, because then you just have the same anxiety about freelancing, and then it's not fun anymore.
Absolutely, absolutely. But I do, it's tough though, because I do think like if I wanted to have a huge art practice, like if I wanted to be a gallery artist and have tons of work, then I would have to treat it a little differently. I'd have to like really focus in and hone in whatever those things are. Like I've got to like go home every day and make 3 paintings every day. Like I'm so far I don't have that desire, but I don't know,
Well,
maybe
that leads perfectly into my next question, which is maybe a bit weighty, but I was going to say, like, if you were looking back on your career from like 100 years in the future, like what would be like something you would be happy with if you could read your obituary? Like, what kind of art practice would you have liked to have, or sort of where do you want to go from here? Obviously not immediately because you're so young and you don't need to make any of these decisions right now. But like what would feel fulfilling for you, do you think?
it's a really good question, mostly because I've struggled with that for so long, but I've always had this idea of doing something community related. And the most concrete been able to get that is I've had this idea to, oh my gosh, it's basically just like a craft supply, not even craft supply. It's almost like I've had this vision, and I'm explaining this all poorly, so I'm sorry, but
No.
really, it'd be a place where there is just a bunch of craft supplies, like cubbies of different materials. We're talking like collage things and printmaking things and paints and markers and whatnot. And people can come and pay for the time. The supplies are just there for people to use. And I can just be there helping facilitate things and be like, oh, do you need to learn how to crochet that thing? For sure. Let's learn how to crochet together. For some reason, some sort of open-ended community crafting space seems like a great thing to try to build or make. And that's been an idea I've had for a while, but for sure have no like actual ways of seeing that through, or like it's still like it's just like an idea. I don't know if that's something I really want to accomplish, but for sure that's something that would make me feel good, I think, is doing something revolved in the community and teaching a little and just having supplies like available for people to use, because not many people have access to that stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know, there's something about that that's exciting to me.
There's definitely a lot of social value in having a communal maker space, and they're not as common as they need to be. So I think that's amazing. Did you watch Out of the Box as a kid? Have you heard of this show?
No, what is, tell me more.
Oh my God. It was like a TV show for kids in the 90s about crafts, and every episode was like the two teachers teaching new crafts and things. It was like Zoom, but like not science experiments.
That's like exactly what I want. What, tell me the name one more time.
I think it's Out of the Box or Outside the Box. I'll
Okay.
send it to you later also.
Okay.
But like definitely when I graduated from college, I was also like, why aren't there more like communal maker spaces? And I think a lot of libraries have stuff like that, but also libraries are pretty underfunded, and that's a whole thing. But that's really cool.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I've always wanted, I learned there's a space, I think it's in like Michigan or something, where there's a tool library. It was like you can come and you can rent like your drill or get the different kinds of saws. I was like, that's what we need in LA. That's
Oh
what
my
I want.
God.
Wouldn't that be amazing? I just want to go and like use someone's 3D printer. I don't want to like have to go buy my own, but I want
Yeah.
to go with the 3D printer.
Yeah. There's oh, what's the writer? Octavia. Oh my God. It's my boyfriend's favorite author. But there's in the one of the LA libraries downtown, there's like an Octavia.
Wait, yeah, that's familiar. That's
Yeah,
very
there's a
yeah,
makerspace, and they have
yes,
three.
yes.
They have like three free 3D printers. Try saying that 3 times quickly. But they have all of these things that you can make, and it's like kind of crazy that there isn't a ton of like public awareness about some of these spaces
Yes.
at
I
all.
seriously, I just learned about that a couple years ago, and I've been living in LA since 2014 or 15. So that's like 9-ish years. Oh my God. So yes, we got to go check it out, or I want to go check
Yes.
it out.
Yes. Oh my God. Group field trip. But that's also, I mean, this isn't my interview, but this is kind of what inspired me to do this podcast and this free art school was that I was like, the element of being an art maker that's like the most inspiring and fulfilling is the communal aspect. And if you're not inside a university, it's definitely a lot harder to find. Well, I mean, there's a lot of like weekend meetups and things, but it's harder to build community and friendship.
Oh
So
my, 100%. Like that was the one thing that I found that I was struggling the most with after I graduated was like, okay, now I don't have this like community of artists or like people I can talk to get feedback or any kind of not that I always want to critique, but it's sometimes nice to have people you know and trust come back to you with that kind of objective look at your work. Anyway, so I for sure have missed that since graduating. I would encourage anyone to like hold on to your people and make a weekly thing or like continue to like connect in some sort of way. Yeah, it's helpful to have people in your wheelhouse.
and
For sure.
adjacent to that, I was going to ask you how it is to be teaching workshops and how fulfilling that is, or exciting, or nerve-wracking, or whatever.
Well, I've only done technically one, so this will be
Oh
my
my
second
God!
one coming up. So
Congratulations!
thank you. It makes so far it makes me nervous, and hopefully because I've done it once before, this one will be easier to do. I get nervous talking in front of people and whatnot, but I
No,
still. But yeah, thank you, thanks. But I believe in teaching people about art stuff, and it's that feels easier if I put it in that context. It makes it not as anxiety inducing a little bit.
you should not be nervous. You're an incredible speaker. You've helped me with like 10,000 art questions, and I am a difficult person to help. So
Oh no, you're a breeze. You're not that like please. You're wonderful always. Also, you have great taste. Not to be like, but still, you have got great taste in supplies. Like you always get like all the stone ground gouache and watercolor, all the fun things. Oh my God.
it's true. Well, I just have a love of color more than anything. Like anytime I'm interested in a new medium, it's just the colors that I'm clearly
Oh,
drawn to.
which I know you said you collected those over the years, but still they look so well together. They look like you pick them out to be hung together at the same time. So,
Maybe
well,
someone will pay me to be a curator one day, and then I won't have to make my own art. Also, I just looked it
absolutely.
up. It's Octavia Butler.
Oh, thank you.
That's what. Yeah.
Yes. Oh my God. There it is. There it
Just
is.
so that it's in the video for anyone watching.
Thank you.
We only have a couple minutes left. I'm sort of wondering a couple of, well, I'll ask you one major question, which is that you've been making art for a very long time. You've had this incredible arc. You've made so many different things. You have such a talent with color and shading and just exploration, and you're sort of fearless. What what advice would you give yourself, maybe the version of yourself that was starting college, about your art making?
Oh man. I for sure would tell smaller Maggie, same size, but younger Maggie. Oh, like, gosh, it's oh, tough question because for sure I didn't know I didn't want to do illustration until like years after that, until I've already tried doing it for a long time. But if I could tell younger Maggie, like, hey, like actually not illustration, just study everything else you're interested in, I think that would have been nice for me to hear because it would have just been so freeing. And I think in that freedom, I would have been able to find whatever it is I have now or much earlier on.
Mm.
So yes, I think that would do it. Oh my God. But I would truly have never thought that before that kind of question, Katie. Oh my gosh.
Well, I think that's useful too, because it also gives you freedom now, because I'm sure your later self would say, don't put so much pressure on yourself and you'll figure it out and just do what you enjoy. But it's hard to look from different perspectives in time because we're, three-dimensional
exactly.
beings living in linear time.
Yes, yes, 100%. Oh man, that's nuts. That's crazy. Oh my God. I can't thank you enough for asking me these great questions. Oh my God.
I can't thank you enough for being here. You're the one this is your interview.
Whatever. Oh my God.
But it's so nice to interview someone who does so many different and like very different looking things, and it's like even if you said you haven't made peace with it, like you're still very confidently putting this stuff out there. You're selling it at the shop, you're doing a workshop. And I think you get to act as a model for other artists who want to explore different things and feel maybe uncomfortable or unconfident doing that. Certainly, at least for me, which has been my experience. So like I'm always in the shop and I'm like, damn, Maggie made that shirt. That's crazy. How the fuck did she do? Oh, I swore. But like how the hell did she do that? Like that's insane. So.
And here I am just fawning over all the type design you do over your Instagram. My God. Oh, type design is a wonderful, beautiful thing, and you do it very well. Not to just like, fluff up each other or whatever, but still, I truly, truly believe you are very talented.
We love artists supporting artists. So thank you for being here. You're amazing. I appreciate your time, and it's always amazing to talk to you.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much. I can't wait to see you next time in the shop and whatnot. It'll be great to see you, of course.
Ditto.